In ancient China, power meant life or death, and it also meant absurdity. Can you imagine a world where a person who wants to be an official must first become a eunuch? Or where a prince's ascension to the throne means his mother must die? Or even where the emperor's last name prevents people from eating certain foods? These unbelievable policies aren't legends. They were real historical systems. Today, we're going to take you on a journey through time to uncover the stories behind these incredible ancient policies. You'll want to watch until the very end because the last policy might be the most shocking of all, and you might be left wondering, were these the products of human wisdom or a madman's game? Naming taboo. The naming taboo was essentially a symbol of the emperor's absolute power. Why? Because out of respect for the emperor, common people were forbidden from using or writing any characters from the emperor's given name. However, this created a huge problem. Chinese names, unlike English ones, aren't made up of special words. They're often a combination of common characters. This made the naming taboo system incredibly inconvenient, so people came up with a few alternative ways to get around it. For example, they would use a homophone to replace the forbidden character, or they'd simply leave a blank space where the character should have been. Sometimes they'd even intentionally write the character incorrectly or leave it incomplete, all as a sign of respect for the emperor. But this practice also caused a lot of problems. The most direct one was that the text in ancient books became a complete mess, which has made it difficult for us to read them today. In some dynasties, they took it so seriously that it led to some ridiculous situations. For instance, the Tang dynasty's emperor had the last name Li, which sounds exactly like the word for carp in Chinese. As a result, catching and eating carp was banned nationwide. Think about it. Carp are a popular food in China, even if they're not that common in the US. This simple ban caused immense inconvenience to people's daily lives. Another example is from the Ming dynasty, where the emperor's last name, Ju, sounded like the Chinese word for pig. In 1519, the emperor actually issued a decree that banned people from raising pigs. This caused a huge mess, even for sacrificial rituals where pork had to be replaced with lamb, and the whole thing was so chaotic that the order eventually had to be withdrawn. Eunuch system. A eunuch was a male servant in ancient palaces who served the emperor and his royal family. The most distinguishing feature of this position was that these men had to undergo a special castration procedure. Looking back through history, China's eunuch system existed for over 4,000 years, from the first dynasty all the way to the last. So, how did this system come to be? The reason is quite straightforward: to protect the emperor's imperial harem. As you can imagine, the emperor didn't want any other men to have contact with his concubines. But there was a lot of work to be done in the palace, and relying solely on female servants wasn't enough. So, the royal family came up with this two birds, one stone solution. As cruel as it sounds, it was the simplest and most effective system for the ancient royal family, and it continued to be used for a very long time. Of course, this system was incredibly inhumane and a product of a very twisted society. But interestingly, China wasn't the only country to have a eunuch system. Ancient Egypt, Rome, Korea, Arabia, and the Ottoman Empire all had similar practices. In ancient China, eunuchs were generally not allowed to participate in state affairs. But because they were with the emperor every day, they were naturally very close to the center of power. As a result, many eunuchs in history gained immense power. Let's start with two positive examples. There was a famous navigator, Zheng He, who was a eunuch from the Ming dynasty. He led a massive fleet on 7 voyages, opening up numerous sea routes and visiting more than 30 countries, reaching as far as Eastern Africa. His expeditions greatly promoted trade and cultural exchange between ancient China and countries in Asia and Africa, having a profound impact on global navigation. On one of his voyages, he even brought back a giraffe from Africa. At the time, people had never seen such an animal and believed it was the mythical Qilin from ancient texts. Then there was Kai Lun, a eunuch from the Han Dynasty, who was known as the Saint of Paper. He improved the papermaking process, using inexpensive materials like tree bark to create high-quality paper. His invention was widely adopted and had a profound impact on the entire world. However, there are likely more negative examples. For instance, the eunuch Zhao Gao from the Qin dynasty is believed by many historians to have, out of self-interest, falsified the emperor's will after his death. He replaced the rightful heir with a young prince who was easier to control, which ultimately accelerated the downfall of the dynasty. During the Ming dynasty, the power of the eunuchs reached its peak. The emperors of this dynasty established two secret police agencies, the Eastern and Western depots, which were led by eunuchs. The purpose was for the emperor to use them to spy on officials and consolidate his own power. But the eunuchs took advantage of this to threaten officials. This caused many officials to fear the eunuchs more than the emperor, because the emperor would believe whatever the eunuchs told them. For instance, the powerful eunuch Wei Zhongxian basically controlled the entire country. And in a video we made before, titled A Love Story Too Scandalous for History Books, The Boy Emperor's Forbidden Love, we mentioned that a Ming emperor was captured during a military campaign because he listened to the eunuch's advice and even gave military power to a eunuch who knew nothing about warfare. This might sound unbelievable, but if you think about it, information was very limited in ancient times. An emperor's understanding of events depended on written reports from officials or surveillance by secret agencies. Eunuchs were responsible for passing on this information, which meant they could control the emperor's sources. Plus, some emperors were looked after by eunuchs from a young age and developed deep emotional attachments, naturally leading them to trust the eunuchs more. This is why so many eunuchs in Chinese history came to power, with some even changing the course of history. If you are interested in this topic, let me know in the comments and I can create a more in-depth video about it. Okay, next topic. Ruling from behind the curtain. It's widely known that ancient China was a male-dominated society, but many women in history also held immense power. They were usually the emperor's mothers, or what we call the Empress dowagers. Why was this the case? In ancient times, the throne was hereditary, and when many emperors died, their heirs were still very young and unable to truly govern the country. At this point, the Empress Dowager would typically step in to help the young emperor handle state affairs. If you've ever watched a Chinese historical drama, you'll see a scene like this. When the emperor and his ministers were holding a meeting, the Empress Dowager would sit behind the emperor, hidden by a semi-transparent screen. The name for this system is ruling from behind the curtain, which literally means listening and handling governance from behind a screen. So why the curtain? This was because ancient China was a patriarchal society, and women were not supposed to show their faces to other men. The screen was a part of this custom, though the specific screen might have varied between dynasties. The origin of this system can be traced back to the Warring States period, with Empress Dowager Mi, who pioneered a woman's participation in state affairs. As we've mentioned in a previous video, the first time this system was officially named ruling from behind the curtain was during the Tang Dynasty, when China's only female emperor, Wu Zetian, used it as empress to govern the country. By the Song Dynasty, it had become a formal national system. In ancient Chinese history, there were about 40 Empress Dowagers who exercised this power, which is a staggering number, considering there were only about 200 emperors in total. It's clear that women also made significant contributions to Chinese history. Of course, besides the positive examples, there are also some controversial negative cases, such as Empress Dowager Cixi of the Qin dynasty, whose influence on national governance is highly debated. We can talk more about their stories in a future video. Alright, on to the next topic. The son is honored, the mother dies. As the name suggests, the son is honored, mother dies system meant that if a prince was named as the heir or ultimately became emperor, his birth mother was forced to take her own life. Doesn't that sound incredibly cruel and absurd? So why did this system exist? The reason is simple, and it's related to the ruling from behind the curtain system we mentioned earlier. If the emperor was young, his mother would typically have to step in and help manage the country. But the problem was, if the Empress Dowager's family was powerful, they might use this opportunity to gradually seize power for themselves. This was the last thing an emperor wanted to see happen. The first emperor to implement this system was Emperor Wu of Han. He was one of the longest reigning emperors in Chinese history, ruling for 54 years. But in his later years, he became extremely paranoid. Before his death, he named his 6-year-old son as his heir, but he was worried his wife would use the ruling from behind the curtain system to take over. So he did something incredibly cruel. He forced his young son's mother to her death. However, this act was considered so inhumane that it remained a singular case during the Han Dynasty. However, during the Northern Wei Dynasty, this system was formally established. At the time, emperors needed to form alliances with northern tribes, so they married many noble women from these tribes. This meant that every prince had a powerful tribe backing him. The emperors worried that after their death, these tribes would control the country through the new emperor's mother. So they formally established the son is honored, mother dies system, which required that as soon as a prince was named heir, his mother had to immediately take her own life. This led to a situation where many of the empress's consorts were unwilling to bear him sons. The system was in place from the first emperor of the Northern Wei until the 8th emperor abolished it. In just over 100 years, the mothers of 5 emperors and 2 crown princes, a total of 7 women, lost their lives to this cruel system. At this point, you might be a little confused. On one hand, the ruling from behind the curtain system hoped the empress mother would help manage the country. But on the other hand, the son is honored, mother dies system was meant to prevent her from seizing power. Isn't that a contradiction? In fact, the core goal of both systems was the same. They both hoped the emperor would get help when he was young, but at the same time, they hoped that when the emperor grew up, power would be smoothly returned to him. But as we all know, power is not something people easily let go of once they have it. Many empress dowagers in history refused to give up their power, even to their own sons. Some even went so far as to kill their grown sons to install a younger emperor so they could continue to rule. The son is honored, mother dies system was created out of this very concern, because a young emperor usually had no defenses against his own mother. But no matter how you look at it, this system was simply too cruel and absurd. And it didn't even completely prevent power from being seized. For example, Empress Dowager Feng, whom we've mentioned before, used this system to eliminate her rivals and, at the same time, controlled the young emperor to take actual control of the country. Human sacrifice. The system of human sacrifice, an extremely cruel system in ancient China, originated in the Shang Dynasty. People at that time believed that after death, they would go to another world, so they wanted to bring their favorite people and things with them. As a result, when wealthy people in the Shang Dynasty died, they would force their wives, female servants, and male servants to be buried alive with them. This was incredibly inhumane. During the Warring States period, some rulers even demanded that common people be buried with them upon their death. However, this system took a turn in the Qin Dynasty. At that time, as different states were constantly at war, the population was a crucial strategic resource. The ruler of the Qin dynasty felt that using live people for sacrifice was too wasteful, so he ordered the abolition of human sacrifice and replaced it with pottery figurines. The terracotta army we see today is a product of this policy, serving as a replacement for human sacrifices for the first emperor of Qin, Qin Shi Huang. It's quite sad, really, that the reason for abolishing this system wasn't due to humanitarian concerns, but simply to save the population for warfare. Despite the Qin dynasty's abolition of human sacrifice, the system was revived after the Liao dynasty. For instance, when the Liao emperor Yalu Aboji died, his wife killed over 100 officials to be buried with him. And when the founding emperor of the Ming dynasty, Zhu Yuanzhang, died, 40 of his consorts were buried or sacrificed with him. This system was later abolished by the 6th emperor of the Ming dynasty, but it was reinstated in the Qin dynasty, only to be finally abolished by Emperor Kangxi. Behind the system of human sacrifice was a severe violation of human rights. In that feudal era, common people and even the empress's consorts were essentially seen as the emperor's property, with no human rights or respect to speak of. All right, on to the last topic. Eunuch officials. Eunuchs were castrated male officials. In ancient China, a minor emperor named Liu Cheng came up with a policy that is simply jaw-dropping. Liu Cheng was handsome and eloquent, but his nature was cruel and tyrannical. After he ascended the throne, he was corrupt and extravagant, running the country into the ground. However, a policy he came up with was even more shocking. Liu Cheng believed that officials with families and wives would be distracted by their personal lives and could not be fully devoted to governing the country. Thus, they couldn't be truly loyal to him. So he only trusted eunuchs who had no descendants. As a result, during Liu Cheng's reign, he made a truly bizarre rule. If you wanted to become an official, you first had to be castrated and become a eunuch. It was absolutely absurd. So, what was the result of this policy? In the year 971, enemy forces were approaching. Liu Cheng, seeing that all was lost, quickly gathered over a dozen ships filled with his plundered gold, silver, and treasures along with his consorts and prepared to escape by sea. But before he could even set sail, the very eunuchs he trusted the most stole the ships and fled in all directions. Left with no other option, Liu Cheng surrendered and his kingdom was thus destroyed. This story teaches us that an absurd system can only lead to an absurd end. All right, today we've covered 6 unbelievable systems from ancient China. To be honest, every single one of them is truly shocking. Whether it's the cruelty of the son is honored, mother dies system, or the absurdity of the human sacrifice system, they all deeply reflect how power completely disregarded and trampled on human rights. So, here's the question. Of the 6 systems we talked about today, which one do you find the most unimaginable? Feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments below. There are actually many more unbelievable and bizarre systems from ancient China. If you're interested in this topic, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. I'll make more videos to continue exploring these incredible stories with you. All right, see you in the next video.